What you need to building real wealth is your goal, the tools you choose matter enormously. Fidelity is one of the best platforms out there for investors, but with over 9,000 funds to pick from, it's easy to get overwhelmed. So today, I'm cutting through the noise and breaking down my top 4 Fidelity index funds that can seriously accelerate your path to financial freedom. Fund number 1, Fidelity 500 Index Fund, FXAIX. Let's start with the classic. FXAIX tracks the S&P 500, meaning you're investing in 500 of the largest publicly traded companies in the U.S. Think technology, healthcare, financials, and more. This is what most people call a core holding, and for good reason. It's simple, it's diversified, and it has a long track record of solid long-term growth. The expense ratio is just 0.015%. That's 15 cents for every $1,000 invested. Incredibly affordable. The historical returns speak for themselves. A $10,000 investment in this fund 10 years ago would be worth nearly $35,000 today. Now, it's not perfect. Because it only holds large-cap stocks, you miss out on the higher growth potential of smaller companies. It's also heavily weighted towards tech, so if that sector takes a hit, you'll feel it. And the dividend yield sits around 1.42%, which isn't great if income is your priority. But if you're in the wealth-building phase and want a reliable, low-maintenance investment, FXAIX is hard to beat. Buy it, hold it, and let time do the heavy lifting. Fund number 2, Fidelity Total Market Index Fund, FSKAX. Next up is the Fidelity Total Market Index Fund, ticker FSKAX, and this one is something special. Where FXAIX gives you the 500 biggest companies, FSKAX goes much further. This fund aims to replicate the performance of the entire U.S. stock market. We're talking roughly 3,000 stocks, large cap, mid cap, and small cap companies, all bundled into one single fund. From Apple and Amazon all the way down to small businesses you've probably never heard of. That breadth of coverage is what makes FSKAX one of the most comprehensively diversified funds available anywhere. I actually like to call FSKAX the buy and hold investor's dream fund because it really is a complete one-and-done solution for someone who wants full exposure to the U.S. market without overthinking it. The expense ratio is the same as FXAIX, just 0.015% or 15 cents per $1,000. Extremely affordable. Now, the returns are slightly lower than FXAIX over the past decade. The reason for that is simple. Smaller companies have underperformed the big guys in recent years. $10,000 invested 10 years ago would have grown to around $33,000 today, which is about $1,700 less than FXAIX. But here's the thing, I wouldn't get too hung up on that difference. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. History actually shows that small and mid-cap stocks can outperform in certain market cycles. And since we can't go back and invest in the past, it makes sense to position yourself for the future. One thing to be aware of, even though FSKAX holds thousands of stocks, it's still primarily driven by large-cap companies because of how they're weighted. So don't think of it as a fundamentally different fund from FXAIX. It's more like FXAIX with added exposure to the rest of the market. The dividend yield is around 1.4%, which is comparable. One critical point, because FSKAX already contains everything in the S&P 500 and more, there's really no reason to hold both FXAIX and FSKAX simultaneously. They overlap heavily. Pick one or the other as your core U.S. equity holding and go from there.
Fund number 3, Fidelity Total International Index Fund, FTIIX. All right, fund number 3 is one that a lot of U.S. investors tend to skip, and I think that's a mistake. This is the Fidelity Total International Index Fund, ticker FTIIX. This fund is designed to track the performance of the global stock market outside the United States. It holds over 5,000 stocks from both developed and emerging markets, places like Europe, Japan, the UK, China, India, Latin America, and more. The idea is to give you exposure to economic growth happening all around the world, not just in America. The expense ratio is 0.06%, still extremely low, but slightly higher than our first 2 funds. That's 60 cents per $1,000 invested. Very reasonable for the level of global diversification you're getting. Now, I'll be honest with you, looking at the raw returns on this fund over the past several years, it's not pretty. $10,000 invested when this fund launched about 8 years ago would have grown to roughly $17,500 today. Compared to our U.S. funds, that's underwhelming. And if you're asking why I'm still including it on this list, that's a fair question. Here's the honest answer. No single market leads forever. U.S. stocks, especially large-cap tech, have absolutely dominated global returns in recent years. But history is full of periods when international markets outperformed the U.S. And when that pendulum swings again, you'll want to have some exposure when it does. Missing out entirely because you were anchored to recent performance is how investors get caught flat-footed. There's also a valuation angle here. Many international markets are trading at significantly lower valuations compared to U.S. stocks right now, which could mean better long-term growth potential going forward. And holding both U.S. and international stocks tends to smooth out volatility because the two markets often move differently under different economic conditions. The dividend yield on FTIOX is actually quite strong at around 3.18%, which is a nice bonus. Things to keep in mind: international markets, especially emerging markets, can be more volatile than the US due to political instability, currency risk, and economic fluctuations. They can also take longer to recover from downturns, so you need patience with this one. It's a long game. I also want to mention that Fidelity offers two other international funds, FSKAX and FSPSX, that are slightly cheaper than FTIOX. The reason I still prefer FTIOX is the sheer number of stocks it holds. More stocks means broader diversification at a better shot at capturing true market returns. Since the fees are all so low anyway, I'm personally comfortable paying a tiny bit more to get much broader exposure. But if cost is your primary concern, FSKAX would be my runner-up pick.
Fund number 4, Fidelity Freedom Index Funds. And our final category is a little different from the others because it's not just one fund, it's a family of funds, and the concept behind them is brilliant in its simplicity. I'm talking about the Fidelity Freedom Index Funds, also known as Target Date Retirement Funds. Here's how they work. Each fund is named for a specific retirement year, going from 2010 all the way out to 2070 in 5-year increments. You pick the fund closest to the year you plan to retire, invest in it, and the fund automatically does all the heavy lifting for you. As you get closer to retirement, the fund gradually shifts its asset allocation, moving away from higher risk stocks and toward more conservative bonds and inflation-protected investments. This strategy is called a glide path, and it's designed to reflect the idea that you can afford more risk when you're young and have decades ahead of you, but you need more stability as you approach and enter retirement. Each Freedom Index Fund is made up of other low-cost Fidelity funds under the hood, which keeps the overall expense ratio very competitive at just 0.12%. That's $1.20 per $1,000. For a fully managed, automatically rebalancing, diversified portfolio, that's a genuinely impressive value. To give you a sense of the returns, let's look at the Freedom Index 2045 Fund as an example. $10,000 invested in that fund 10 years ago would have grown to just over $24,000 today. Solid, if less aggressive than a pure stock fund. Now, there are a couple of criticisms worth addressing. First, some investors feel that these funds become too conservative too quickly, meaning they shift into bonds sooner and more heavily than a higher risk-tolerant investor would want. My personal workaround for that is to always select the furthest out target date fund available. Right now, that's the 2070 fund, regardless of when I actually plan to retire. That keeps the allocation more growth-oriented for longer. Second, these funds are designed for the average investor, which means they may not perfectly fit everyone's specific goals or financial situation. If, like me, you prefer a 100% stock-heavy portfolio during the accumulation phase, a target date fund may feel too tame. But for someone who wants to hand the reins over and just let the fund do its thing, this is about as close to a perfect set-it-and-forget-it solution as you'll find. So there you have it, my top 4 Fidelity Index funds to help you grow your net worth and build lasting financial freedom. FXAIX for straightforward S&P 500 exposure, FSKAIX for total U.S. market coverage, FTIOX for global diversification, and the Fidelity Freedom Index funds for the ultimate hands-off retirement approach. Now, you might be wondering, what about those Fidelity zero-fee funds? Why didn't those make the list? I actually cover that in detail in a separate video, along with my top 5 investment portfolios to help you build serious long-term wealth. I'll link both below so you can check them out next. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. It genuinely makes a difference. And if you're new here and want more straightforward, no-nonsense content about building wealth and investing wisely, make sure you subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.